Hi and welcome to another episode of Primal TV. I'm Aimee, a food and cooking coach, and today I'm on location. I'm at the location that our Return to Nature camping retreat is going to be held in April this year, and I thought what better place to do a bush foods cooking demo to introduce you to some of the bush foods that will be available at the camp over the weekend that you can pick and eat and learn how to cook with. I'm going to show you in particular a bush food that is really common now in Australia. It's getting more popular, more chefs are using it and more farms are growing it. So it's certainly not only available at our camp and at this spot, but it is something that our campers are going to be able to enjoy while they're here and learn more about over the weekend. And today's recipe is Paleo Pop Rocks Lollies using finger limes, one of the most beautiful native Australian foods. The reason I call these Paleo Pop Rocks Lollies is because the little tiny balls of citrus that are inside the fruit stay whole when they're in the lolly, and when you bite into it, you get this giant burst of flavour. And I'm using a few different colours of finger limes, which all have different coloured little balls of juice, and you get this beautiful multicoloured lolly. So when you bite into it, there's all this flavour and all these colours, and it's just this burst of flavour in your mouth, and it's like Pop Rocks but a healthy version of it. So I'm excited to show you how to make these today. So let's get stuck into it and I'll show you how to make them. So there's basically just 3 ingredients to this recipe. We're using coconut milk as our liquid to make the lolly nice and creamy. We're using gorgeous fresh finger limes picked straight off the bush behind me. Some gelatin. They're the 3 key ingredients. The other thing you can add if you want to sweeten it, make it a bit more palatable, because finger limes are a citrus, they're quite tart, is some raw honey. That's my preference for a natural sweetener. And a lot of Australian bush fruits actually go really well with coconut. So it's great for us paleo folk who don't do dairy and want to enjoy bush foods a little bit more in our diet, like I do. I love consuming native fruits. They're fantastic, really flavourful. So all you need is a saucepan on the stove, some room temperature or cold coconut milk. I'm using half a tin of the 400 mils, and my favourite brand is the Aimee brand. So that just goes in. It's really important to have a whisk handy, and just give that a stir. Next you'll need good quality grass-fed beef gelatin powder that is 100% pure with nothing else added, no additives, no preservatives. And it's the really fine creamy coloured grains. And this is the type of gelatin that sets when it's been refrigerated after it's dissolved. So it needs something hot, then it needs to be refrigerated or in the house on a really cold winter's day, and it will set nice and firm. So to get the texture of lolly, we need a fair bit of gelatin compared to how much liquid. So it's a really firm end result once it's been in the fridge for a couple of hours. So to 200 mils of liquid, which is the coconut milk, I'm going to use about 2 tablespoons of gelatin. So I'm just using a nice big heaped spoon, and the important thing to do now is just gently sprinkle the gelatin over the top of your coconut milk, over the surface. If we don't do this, it clumps up and you ruin it. You lose most of that gelatin. You can't save it once it's been clumped. So put that over the surface just evenly, like so. And what starts to happen is the gelatin starts to soften in and absorb with the liquid, and it starts the dissolving process. So we do this before we turn any heat on, and that's because otherwise it's a much slower process. If we start with hot liquid, we can only put a little bit of gelatin in at a time, whisking really briskly. Otherwise it clumps quickly and it is wasted very easily. So it's important to start with this process, let the gelatin soften, and then turn the heat on, and it will finish dissolving with a bit of a stir with the whisk, and that's it. So a lot less effort, especially if you're doing a larger batch. And a larger batch, I would recommend a larger saucepan with a larger surface area. So basically the larger the saucepan, the more surface area there is available, the quicker the whole process. So a time-saving tip for in the kitchen. So this is starting to soften now, and I'll show you what happens in the process. So as you could see, the gelatin was molding into the liquid because it's trying to find the liquid so it can soften. That's how it wants to go. And it looks really brainy and really strange in there in the saucepan. It's quite an interesting sight. So that's what's happening when the gelatin is softening with the liquid. And once that has softened on top, you simply turn the heat on and wait for it to start heating through from the base. And when you can tell that there's some warmth coming through, you just start whisking. When the liquid starts to get warm and start bubbling, start stirring it with your whisk and keep the heat on about moderate and whisk constantly until all the lumps have dissolved. So while that continues to warm through, we can start getting the finger limes ready to go in. So start with a nice big fat fresh finger lime. If you can access a few different varieties from your supplier or from the shops, it's really handy to get a few different colours, and that's going to give you the colour variety in your lollies. So start by chopping off one end with a sharp knife and squeezing it out onto a chopping board, because most varieties are also full of seeds. Even when they're really ripe, they have a lot of seeds in there, and it's not as enjoyable to eat those in the lolly. You can separate those before they go in, and some varieties have more seeds in them than others, I have found. So we can just grab a spoon and separate some of those seeds and just keep the citrus that you want to use in your lollies. So just separate those out. Doesn't matter if you don't get all the little seeds. Now turn the heat down, and this is where you can add your sweetener. You didn't need to add it any earlier than this, just at the end so it dissolves in the warm liquid. I'm using about a tablespoon of raw honey, and this quantity is really up to you and what your taste buds prefer. Give that a stir. Okay, so that heat's off, honey is dissolved. Now I'm just going to finish cutting my finger lime. So I've got green, red, yellow, and they'll give me all different beautiful colours to go in my lollies. Now finger limes are a fantastic native fruit. They are really, really high in a lot of important vitamins and nutrients, particularly high in vitamin C, I think 30 times higher than in a mandarin, and very high in vitamin E, which is said to help prevent against disease, but also to help heal cells. So it's a really important vitamin to have in the body. Really, really high in antioxidants, so good for the immune system. It's a very underutilised bush food, but I think it is gaining in popularity in the country and overseas, which is great to see. Another name for finger lime is bush caviar, because the little balls inside look like caviar from fish. So I'm using about just under 2 tablespoons, and that gives a really nice zest, and the little balls spread out evenly through the lolly, so you get a nice even flavour hit every time you bite into it, which is great. So stir that gelatin mixture one more time, take the whisk out, and just transfer that liquid to your jug that you're pouring from with the finger lime pieces. Next, so give that a bit of a stir. And it is a thick mixture. Gelatin makes liquid thicker. So I think that's partly why when they set in the fridge, the finger lime pieces sort of sit evenly throughout, because they're so thick. They're not just hitting straight to the bottom. They're lighter than the gelatin mixture, so they're sort of floating around in there. Next, it's handy to grab some sort of flat, stable board, like a hard plastic or glass chopping board, and to place your molds on to be able to transfer them to the fridge without your mixture falling out, because I'm using silicone molds. And these are absolutely everywhere. You can buy them at Kmart, Target, kitchen stores, online, op shops. They're absolutely everywhere. I've got a really simple little oval pattern shaped mold today. You could use any mold that you like. And because they're so floppy, it's important to pop them on a stable surface to be able to transfer that whole thing into the fridge. And that way you won't be trying to carry it like this to the fridge and lose your mixture on your shirt or on the floor. So that's how I start. I get my 2 molds on a board, and then I can pour my mixture in and just fill them right to the top of each. If you overfill any and it's running over the top of your mold, just grab a silicone spatula and scrape them into the next available mold spot, and you will save a lot of liquid. Then you're not going to waste any. And you can do that at the end just in case you've got any drips that you don't want to waste. And now this will only take a couple of hours to set in the fridge. If it's a nice cold fridge, it will set really fast. And once they are set, it's important to take them out of the molds. Don't leave them in there as a storage container. Remove them from the molds and put them in an airtight container so they don't dry out. The edges will dry really quickly when exposed to the cold fridge air for too long. And they won't taste nice. Dried out gelatin coconut milk is not very yummy. Welcome to my Bushfoods grocery store. This is where I come and pick beautiful native foods right off a tree, cook them, eat them, enjoy them. There's nothing better. I love it so much. And this is a very happy finger lime tree. It's had a very good season with all the rain that we had in the last 12 months. It was covered in big, fat, juicy finger limes. So I'm going to get a picking. Check out my fancy finger lime grabbing tools. Tongs. There are just way too many spikes to risk going into there without tongs. That's how you do it.